Today we're going to be discussing self-confidence. Some like to call it self-esteem. Well, I, for one, am not crazy about the term self-esteem, and for a lot of reasons, and we're going to talk about that today on the show. First of all, self-esteem, what even is it? Can you define it in any real terms? I would say no. And my preference is always to talk about what is actually tangible and measurable. And magically, feelings aren't just implanted in you. But we are led to believe through the concept of self-esteem that somehow, that if you just build your self-esteem or build others' self-esteem, especially your children, that it's going to make your whole life better. I prefer the word self-confidence. Self-confidence says that it is something you consciously build and choose. It speaks to personal responsibility, strength, resilience, and even strength of character. I like to think, and I believe that thinking is very important, especially when we are discussing empirical data for use in research. Other terms like confidence, contentment, and self-concept seem to fit the bill for what is actually measured. Well, Psychology Today says that however well-intentioned this everybody gets a trophy self-esteem movement has totally screwed up the next generation. This, like Common Core, is what happens when the government decides to impose its experiments on our children. In classrooms, students read books like Everyone is Special and All About Me. Teachers were taught not to criticize and not to tie praise to performance. All this actually accomplished was a sense of entitlement that is devastating to the productivity of the millennial generation. They can't compete in the international marketplace, and they are government and parent dependent. They're largely incompetent, according to studies. A 2007 LA Times report on international student assessments in 30 different countries showed that American students are ranking 21st in science and 25th in math. Experts in outcomes declared that the millennial generation is unprepared to compete in the global economy, and we spend more than any of the countries beating us by far. But that's not the worst of it. The really horrible part is that despite their ignorance and incompetence, American millennials aren't bothered by their failure. They're hooked on praise, and their peers in neighboring countries are far better able to recognize and take responsibility for their mistakes. The Journal of Personality released a paper that showed that millennials prefer a boost of self-esteem over sex, food, drinking, and pretty much any other pleasurable outlet. There's literally now an app called I Flatter that boasts its ability to brighten your day, make you laugh, and to boost your self-confidence, regardless of your actual skills, knowledge, or ability. Take the Academy Awards. Remember the phrase, "and the winner is"? Well, that's changed now because we don't want the poor movie stars who didn't win to feel badly about themselves. So instead they say, "and the award goes to." Just another example of that. The deeper psychological effect is even more frightening. As Dr. Sitowik wrote in Psychology Today, the zero-sum premise is that every winner demands a loser and that personal accomplishment only comes at the expense of someone else. This is corrosive for interpersonal relationships in career and family. It creates intense jealousies that are destructive, and businesses are feeling the outcomes now. Studies indicate that especially in women in their 20s and 30s, they are far more jealous of one another than in decades prior. And worse, they believe more strongly that their own success somehow depends on someone else's failure or even demise. This has left managers and professors at a loss as to how to deal with these jealousies. And additionally, this leaves the envier detached, depressed, and even in some cases, suicidal or homicidal. Most of this underlying attitude can be traced back to the very dangerous government experience of the self-esteem movement in schools. There is a solution, though, and it's simple. If you want confidence, then accomplish. Dr. Sitowik says that numerous psychological studies have confirmed that satisfaction is an inside game. He cites that after the thrill of winning, for example, lottery winners and Nobel laureates revert to their previous temperaments. It is the striving rather than the reward that is actually long-lived. Dr. Sitowik concludes, like capitalism, whose riches cannot exist without the threat of bankruptcy, or heaven without the possibility of hell, self-effort must be willing to risk failure. When it happens, it's never the end of the world, and building up of tolerance for rejection builds up the courage to put many irons in the fire, says Dr. Sitowik, knowing that only some will come to fruition.